I'm pleased to introduce Isis Pamela Rodriguez. She is a graduate of a double master's degree in TESOL and Foreign Languages, Literatures, and Cultures from Southern Illinois University of Carbondale in the United States. She is currently a language teacher at our alma mater, the UPNFM. Ms. Rodriguez is going to talk to us about coping with collective unsettling events in the language classroom.
Hello, participants. Welcome to our 12th International Conference for Teachers of English. I hope you have enjoyed all the talks, the plenaries, and the workshops that our specialists have prepared for you. My name is Isis Rodriguez, and I decided to create a presentation on coping with unsettling events in the language classroom. The reason why I decided to work on this topic is because the COVID-19 pandemic has shed light on the lack of resources that we have to link language acquisition to mental health education and how it affects not only the learning process, but also the personal lives of students and teachers. The pandemic has affected both students and faculty at different levels, and it is important to be aware on how it can affect people and how we can also cope with it in the language classroom. So let's begin with our presentation.
All right, so let's explore the table of contents. First, we're going to be talking about what unsettling events are and why I call them that. Second, we will be talking about who are affected by these events. Even though, of course, we're talking about collective unsettling events that for sure might have some effects on everyone. There might be some people that would be more impacted emotionally by these events. So we will discuss on that a little. Third, we will talk about the effect of these events on academic performance, but also at personal level, which is a conversation that we readily have in the context of education. And number 4, I'm going to share a few activities and tips that have worked for me in the past with my classes and, that I would like to share with you today. So, unsettling events, what are they? So examples of them, we have the pandemic and what comes with the pandemic, the COVID pandemic in this case, the lockdown, the isolation that everyone experienced at some point, some people more than others, but it is, of course, a collective unsettling event. Natural disasters like the hurricane that we had, 2 hurricanes that we had last year in our country, in Honduras. Climate crisis, it's constantly there. It's a problem that I feel it's breathing in our necks in an informal way to say it. And political issues as well in our country, which is a very current topic at the moment. So these collective unsettling events in the midst of everyday events put people, including students and teachers, of course, on a state of alert. And they cause justifiable levels of stress and anxiety. I believe everyone has experienced that at different levels, perhaps, but everybody has experienced that in Honduras. And of course, people in general in the whole world. So students are likely to feel more vulnerable when these situations occur. And it is partially a responsibility of adults, if your students are very young, to help them feel safe, to talk about it. Overall, I think educators can help students understand what is happening in fact, right? And how these events do or do not impact our lives and how we can cope with the reactions that we have to those events. So as an example, I decided to display the results of a study on the increase of depression and anxiety after the COVID-19 pandemic started. We can see the results on screen. So the charts show that last year, both women and men experienced more depression and anxiety than in previous studies. So I'd like you to know that the numbers increased quickly and dramatically on teenage years, but the levels, if you really see, reach their peak on ages 40 through 60, right? So who are affected? I would say we can tell from the looks, but definitely no age group is or gender is unlikely to experience negative emotions in relation to the isolation period that the COVID-19 pandemic brought. And this is just one example of one of the unsettling events I was discussing before. So, number 2, who are affected? As I said, there are, of course, particularly more sensitive groups that might have a more difficult time dealing or coping with the effects of an unsettling event. So let's go over a few of them. So people who live in proximity to traumatic events or target areas, this resonates with me mostly when the hurricanes happened. So people, students, faculty, teachers, living in proximity to the areas that were more affected by the hurricanes would, of course, be emotionally more affected, if not even physically affected than others. Although, of course, it was an unsettling event for everyone in the country. People who live in violent or poor neighborhoods as well. And as for this, I'd like to say this is like a constant stress or a constant concern for people living in this violent neighborhood. So of course it represents charge on the emotional charge, I mean to say. People who have suffered a personal loss after the event. How many people do we know that perhaps lost a close friend or a close family member during the pandemic, or perhaps during any other of these events like the hurricanes? How many people also lost their houses or properties or any goods, right? So of course they would be more affected emotionally than those who thankfully did not suffer any personal loss. People who have relatives involved in emergency response or public safety, of course, they are exposed. So we would be more concerned about those relatives of us that are involved, or close friends that are involved in emergency response. And lastly, people who experience post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, or other mental illness. So I'd like to expand a little more on this last item. Since there is no way to know whether a student is in this particular position or not, I would highly recommend we look at the indicators. We're going to discuss in a moment these indicators. So some students might come to you and tell you straight away that they suffer from a mental illness. It has happened to me, but others might not do it or might not even know it. Now, I've read several reports and articles on these issues from other countries, but I wanted to know the numbers in Honduras. And well, unfortunately, I didn't find a lot of information available on INE, which is our National Statistics Institute, but I'd like to share what I found from other institutions. So we have this, I will read it for you. In Honduras, Chinos Flores et al., 2002, established that around 35% of Hondurans were affected by mental and behavioral disorders, which they attributed at the moment to low socioeconomic conditions, citizen insecurity, and natural disasters. So as I was mentioning before, we see, well, that there is mention of a perhaps collective unsettling event, like a natural disaster. But if we look at the other two, socioeconomic conditions, citizen insecurity, these are events going on. And perhaps we can even say that some citizens are used to it already. That doesn't mean, though, that it doesn't represent a charge emotionally on these people, right? So I think 35% is a high number, and this was done in 2002, several years ago. So on the same studies, Valladares Mejia says, in our study on the prevalence of mental disorders and the relationship with traumatic experiences and violence, it was found that the overall prevalence of symptomatology of mental disorders for the Department of Lloro is 63%, for Choluteca, 62%, and for Cortés, it is 74% in adults between 18 and 30 years old, right? This study was specifically carried in Lloro, Choluteca, and Cortés, three of our departments in Honduras. Considering, of course, Cortés, where we have San Pedro Sula, the second biggest city of our country. Look at the numbers, 63%, 62%, and 74% are really, really high numbers. And this is only counting adults between 18 and 30 years old. This caught my attention because yet we would say that these are really young people. And despite the numbers, we have very little education in regard to mental health in our educational institutes. So I think that's on us to consider, to study, and well, to try to make an effort in improving the situation. So I have some numbers on that. In terms of supporting child and adolescent health, a low percentage, from 1 to 20% of primary and secondary schools carry out in-school activities to promote mental health and prevent mental disorders. This was found by the OMS in 2008. So this represents a problem because on one hand, there is this taboo issue. People don't talk openly and seriously about mental health, as the opinion of it being a matter of weakness is still fairly common, unfortunately. But on the other hand, we have the opposite side of the spectrum. There are people who need to understand that a mental health disorder or illness needs to be diagnosed by a specialist and not by themselves. So I have one more piece of information on this. In Honduras, there is no coordinated entity to oversee health education and awareness campaigns on mental health issues. These last two pieces of information were findings on a study from the Pan American Health Organization in 2008. Well, in conclusion, in Honduras, we need more education on mental health issues. And the change, I believe, starts here with us being more aware and more knowledgeable about these needs, right? As it says here, there is really no coordinating entity looking over mental health education, right? And it is, unfortunately, it is really sad because people need this, especially in a country where access to health is not, unfortunately, for everybody. All right. Let's move on to the effects. So I'd like to show you some of the effects that these unsettling events might have on students, but also I would say on faculty, on teachers. So we have feelings of helplessness, frustration, and anger, agitation, increasing conflicts, poor concentration, changes in patterns of behavior, sleeping and eating disturbances. It might also trigger or lead to depression and anxiety. You don't need to have it to be affected, but the concerns or the effects of unsettling events might trigger these mental health issues. So beyond these specific indicators of worries and anxious reactions, some students might simply show differences in the way they usually behave. So for example, a student who would usually talk a lot may be quiet. A student who is normally friendly may seem sort of withdrawn or show atypical angry responses to others. Students who usually turn in their assignments on time may be late, or the work may be less satisfactory. So these changes on behavior could be very good indicators, and they might be expressions of concern. Another thing that we can also consider is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is pretty much a delayed response to an event. So this might be even trickier to identify because it takes place perhaps months or weeks after the event. That doesn't mean, though, that it doesn't have any effects on our students. So let's talk about coping. What do we mean by coping? Well, coping refers to a whole set of responses that try to reduce the negative qualities of a stressful situation like an unsettling event, for example. So we talk about the definition of coping because I want to tell teachers and faculty that there are some things we can do in the classroom to help our students cope. I don't mean to say that we are psychologists. Unless we get a psychology degree, of course, we are not qualified to substitute therapy or psychiatric treatment, of course not. There is a limit to what we can do. We need to be aware of that for the sake of our own health and the health of our students. But of course, there are a few things we can do just to improve the environment or to help people open up for themselves, for their own health, right? Okay, so let's see. Here, I'm going to present you a set of strategies to cope in the language classroom. This was suggested by the Council for Exceptional Children. And we have first, remain calm, which might seem pretty obvious, but it's not. It's easier said than done, of course. Acknowledge and normalize feelings. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated. It's okay to feel like you don't want to do anything. So we should acknowledge those feelings. It's okay, right? We want our students to, this is like something nice I heard last year on our previous conference about having our students be global citizens. And this also made me think, yeah, I want my students to be global citizens and be concerned about what's happening around the world, but we also need them to cope, right? And what comes with the idea of caring about everything going on, it also comes with an emotional charge. So we need to acknowledge that and normalize negative feelings. It's okay to feel them. Next, courage, compassion, and helpfulness, of course. Take care of your own needs. As I said, how we cannot expect our students or faculty to care about what's going on outside in the world if they first don't take care of their own needs. So we need the complete package here. Maintain a normal routine. I will elaborate a little bit more on that in a minute. Emphasize people's resiliency. Thinking about ways in which people have gone through difficult times and how they have overcome those difficult times. That's what we mean when we say emphasize people's resiliency, right? Although things might seem very difficult at the moment, there are always good things that we have inside of us that will help us go through those difficult times. So that's what we mean by resiliency. Be optimistic, right? When it's the moment. stick to the facts, and do something positive with students to help others in need. I have found out that this last one is really important. It's a key one to do with our global citizens, to actually do something, take some action and help those in need. That also includes emphasizing people's resiliency. All right, now I want to share with you a few practical activities that you can do in your class to help your students have that transition and get ready to continue with their normal routine, right? We said it's important to maintain a normal routine, but to do that, there has to be a transition. We cannot just meet again in class, pretending that nothing happened, ignoring the topic, because that's not going to work. We are not acknowledging and normalizing feelings if we do that. So these activities that I'm about to show you have helped me do that transition from a stressful situation, from a sad situation towards a normal routine. So the first one that I have for you are timelines. So the timelines, as well as the rest of the activities, are easily adaptable to students of different age and different levels of proficiency. The purpose of the timelines is expressing feelings. And I like timelines because you can use the target language as well. And connecting the target language to expressing feelings might also improve their motivation to learn the language. And that will be, of course, a topic for another talk. So let's start with timelines. So the first thing you would like to do is pre-teach the vocabulary you think would be useful for your timeline. In my case, I've decided to teach adjectives that I think would be useful to use in their timelines. We're going to see an example in a minute. Provide a timeline sample, very important. Provide students alone time to fill out the timeline, right? This is more of an inner experience, right? Like a solo experience. So students would need some time alone to think about what they feel and write it in the timeline. Pre-teach extra vocabulary if necessary, and finally provide examples on how to create resilient statements. So let's move on. Let's look at an example on this. So I have a timeline. This is something I did last year. I think it was November or December last year with my students. So we worked on a timeline to track the different experiences and feelings we had throughout the year 2020. So this is how it looks, year 2020, and then we have a few months. You can add months or get rid of months. It's all adjustable to your needs. And here we have feelings, where students are going to write feelings that they experienced on each month. So let's look at some examples. So for March, we have, how was the person feeling? Happy to have a break, uncertain. April, nervous, paranoid, stressed. June, less nervous, worried about family. August, isolated, unemployed, hopeless. October, relieved, more calm, stressed. And November, worried, disappointed, angry. So as you see, it's a mix of feelings, and that's okay. It doesn't have to look like this for everyone. It might look very different depending on your students. But the idea here is that they can express what they feel, that they can evaluate how the experience and how their feelings have evolved throughout, in this case, the months. When the lockdown isolation experience was still very recent. All right, so then, as I said in this part, I would pre-teach more vocabulary if necessary. for the next step. In the next step, what we're going to try to do is write statements of resiliency, how you felt, but what was something also positive that you were experiencing at that time. So I have, for example, I felt uncertain when I had to stay home. I felt paranoid when I went for groceries. I felt worried when I thought I could bring COVID-19 to my family. I felt disappointed when I saw so many people lose their houses after the hurricane. These are a few examples. So these are, let's say, the negative experiences or the negative feelings. You can even identify a utterance here. We have I felt, then we have a feeling word, when, and then we have the specific moment in which they would feel this way. So what about the resilience statements? We have the first, I felt uncertain when I had to stay home. Then we have something positive that you felt also at that time. But I felt good because I could eat fresh. I felt paranoid when I went for groceries, but I felt less stressed because there were no traffic jams. I felt worried when I thought I could bring COVID-19 to my family, but I'm grateful it didn't happen. I felt disappointed when I saw so many people lose their houses after the hurricane, but I felt happy to donate clothes and food, right? So these would be some examples of these resilient statements that students could produce that would, as I said before, establish a connection between expressing feelings and also the target language. This would create, I think, motivation in students into using the target language and also expressing how they feel. So let's move on to the next activity I suggest, a flash poetry writing. So this is an idea adapted from Bright Ideas, a teacher's resource manual. So first we have discuss nouns that are involved in the event, right? For example, if we decide to do it on natural disaster, well, we can discuss nouns like hurricane, destruction, loss, right? So we discussed the vocabulary before. Then on line 1, we choose a noun that describes the person, place, or thing you have selected. Every student would select a topic. Well, as it says here, person, place, or thing. Then on line 2, they would describe this noun with 2 adjectives joined by the word and or but. Line 3, use a verb form and an adverb to show this noun in a typical action. Line 4, think of a comparison beginning with the word as or like to show a special quality this noun has. So let's look at, oops, there was a 5th line. Use a phrase beginning with if only to express a wish regarding this noun. So let's look at a couple of examples I'm very proud to say my students wrote in a class last year. So we have the first one. I liked it a lot. This was about about around the time when hurricanes hit Honduras last year. So we have hurricane. As you see, we have the noun. The person decided to use the noun hurricane. Then we have the 2 adjectives joined by the word and, tenacious and frightening. Then on line 3, we have a verb form and an adverb to show this noun in a typical action, devouring ferociously. Then on the 4th line, we have a comparison, right, with the utterance as adjective, as noun, right? So as brave as a predator. And then on line 5, we have a phrase beginning with if only, and then a wish regarding the noun hurricane. So we have hurricane, tenacious and frightening, devouring ferociously, as brave as a predator, if only you would go away. Then we have another one here, democracy. Needed and denied, escaping from our hands, as unreachable as the sun, if only they would let you come. So this is also a nice way of introducing students into poetry. If you're teaching a literature-related class, it's really nice to see them happy to build their own poems, to get creative. And it's also a way of expressing what they feel, or the expressing their discomfort with a specific event. So let's move on to the next activity. We have guided 3-minute meditation. So to do this, this is also adapted from the magazine English Teaching Forum. So the way I have done this activity, first I choose one word, phrase, or quote that summarizes the thought I want to discuss that day. Then I pre-teach the concept, and I involve students by asking them to Google pictures, send me the pictures, share the pictures, discuss why they think these pictures are related to the concept. So let's say that we're talking about hope, right? So they would Google, or they would search for images that represent hope for them. And then we would discuss why they think these pictures carry the message of hope. Then I would play calming music or sounds. This is optional, of course, and I believe this works much better when you are in the same classroom than when you are online, because in my experience, sometimes students have some noise in their houses, so it is a little difficult for them to connect, let's say, but it's an option. So then I would ask students to close their eyes and lean on their desks or tables or whatever they are. I have experienced that they don't like closing their eyes in front of cameras. It feels a little bit awkward, I imagine. So I just ask them to close their eyes and lean on their desks. Then I read the phrase or quote with a calm voice. And this is something that has taken me some practice, of course. Then I use a basic script to guide students into meditation, which will be attached for you at the end of the presentation. And then I finish with a transition. So a transition could be something like, well, now you will have 5 minutes to use the restroom, get some water, stretch, and then I would continue as I normally do with the lesson. This has particularly helped before taking tests or quizzes when students are feeling nervous. It helps a lot to relax them before that. So also before doing a guided meditation with my students, I explain what meditation is and the benefits of it. So I would tell my students that meditation will help to clear their minds and prepare them for learning as well, and that it increases their focus, it opens their minds, and well, they would receive and remember information in a better way, more easily. So this guided meditation also provides opportunity for vocabulary learning. As you see, we would discuss a concept, they would Google pictures, they would have interaction in the target language. So yes, for me, the results I have gotten after the practices I've done with 3-minute meditation is that students can really manage their stress better, and they respond better to the challenges I give them in the class. So it has worked very well for me. All right, so I have here a few lines on meditation. It has been linked to increased ability to focus and self-regulations. Schools that have implemented meditation school-wide have found a reduction in suspensions, increased student attendance, and fewer behavior problems, results that lead to increased focus and learning. Right, very promising. This is a collection of findings from Campbell, Kerp, and Tang Yiyuan. So there is one last activity that I would like to suggest, online yoga. So I want to suggest this YouTube page. You don't really have to do it on session, but you can just assign videos for your students. You can, what I've done in the past is that I tell them, well, we are going to start the synchronic meeting 15 minutes after the normal time. And in the previous minutes, you should watch this video and, well, try to do these yoga exercises, right? So in this YouTube page, they have different playlists. As you see here, they are specialized, some of them for teens, some of them for children, some of them for adults, even for families. So I think this is a really great source, and I invite everyone to try it out when you're feeling stressed or when you're feeling you have a lot in your head. So, well, in my experience, using these techniques, the online yoga and the other techniques I shared with you, has been very, very productive, very interesting. Overall, students have reported to feel less stressed and feel more comfortable in class. And it has also allowed them to communicate thoughts, to communicate their feelings that perhaps otherwise they would have not been released. And this is something that I have been told by my students. It has also helped me as their instruction to have a transition from one of these events back to the normal routine that I was telling you about in the classroom. So the final result is that everyone is more focused and engaged in class, and there is definitely better rapport between classmates and teachers as well. So yes, I'm recommending these activities because they have worked for me, and I hope that they work for you as well. So let's go over the conclusions. First, events such as a pandemic, a natural disaster, or disconcerting social issues might affect the minds of our students and create burdens for them. Second, the effects of unsettling events can affect language learners' ability to acquire language, since they can affect at an academic and personal level as well. Third, Hondurans need more education on mental health. Teachers can contribute to finding and sharing self-regulation techniques to lower the negative feelings that unsettling events can cause in students, regardless of their age. Fourth, activities such as timeline construction, flash poetry writing, 5-minute mindfulness, and online yoga seem to cause positive reactions in students and increase concentration and focus. These activities are also linked to the use of the target language in a meaningful way. All right, that said, I hope that you enjoyed my talk. Thank you very much for being with me today. Here are my bibliographical references if you want to do some further reading on the topic.